Hi guys, it's Shime and welcome back to my channel, and today we're finally back to continue, the read along for ErHa volume 8? 8, yes, okay. So, sorry I have been a little bit MIA, it just kind of happened and now we're here. And yeah, so for the foreseeable future, I am going to be doing the live streams on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. GMT. It's 5 p.m. my time, and I'm just hoping there are people who will still tune in for it. I know it's very early in comparison to normal. Hi! Was not expecting to see you here. um, but yeah, so very early compared to normal. This is not a good start. Um, and we are just gonna hope that I don't cry too much. I have tissues here with me just in case. Um, and a bus passing by with a massive racket, apparently. It's quite funny that the two people who are here are from the UK, considering that I would assume you guys would be the ones who would not be able to attend because it's kind of like middle work time. Um, but anyway, uh, so I'm sorry, I'm a little bit scatterbrained. I feel like I always have to like recalibrate if I've been away for more than a week from the live streams. But yeah, okay. I don't wanna. I know you always get very excited when I cry, Lee. Um, but yeah, okay. So as I said, we are on volume 8, and we are going to be going for 2 hours, so it's going to run from 5 to 7 with the normal 10-minute break in the middle. Um, I appreciate it, and good luck with Absolute Zero. Hi! Um, I'm very nervous. I've kind of like been terrified to restart because I just know at one point I'm gonna be basically crying the entire time. So I don't. I just have a certainty considering the cover. Anyway, okay, I have put it off long enough. Let's focus. I have coffee here with me as well. Instead of tea because it's my coffee drink time rather than my tea drink time. And maybe it's gonna be a good thing to have coffee for notification with this. So, anyway, let us get going. So, for anyone who is following along with their actual copy as well, we are on page 87 and chapter, yeah, chapter 251, going back. I'm assuming that means going back to the present, which I'm not looking forward to because that means we have to deal with Shime. Okay. What are you going to use the forbidden technique for? Chuaning wasn't sure how many times he'd asked the question, but on that particular day, Moran was in a good mood. He answered slowly, at last. To go back to the past. To do what? Ta Jin raised his eyes. I'll save him. Whom he meant was obvious. Chuaning was standing before Moran in robes as white as snow. If you read all the records on the first forbidden technique, you should know all of its practitioners died horrific deaths. The last Zhongshe who mastered it tried to bring back his daughter from a different universe. He and that world's version of himself ended up killing each other. You can't be ignorant of this case. Oh, damn, this feels like it's foreshadowing of what's probably gonna happen. Look, I have a rule, and obviously, even if this ends in tragedy, don't tell me. But I have a rule that you can put me through as much suffering as you want, as long as I get a happy ending at the end. If I don't get a happy ending, I don't deserve to suffer for the journey. That's my general rule, okay? Hi. But we're like 8 volumes into 11 volumes, so we're sticking through to the end regardless of what it ends up being, but I'm not gonna be happy about it, okay? Anyway. Oh. Moran frowned and shifted in his seat, crossing one leg over the other. He propped his cheek against a hand and looked up at Chuaning. Actually, this venerable one is ignorant indeed. Chuaning blinked. What's the point in studying a failure? No one's ever succeeded, said Chuaning. Then this venerable one will be the first. Great! You cannot foresee the consequences of disturbing space-time, Chuaning warned. Moran snorted. Whatever chaos or destruction comes of it, how does it affect this venerable one? Oh, you ignorant fool. That was me, that was not Chuaning. Even if you were really able to bring Shime Jing from another universe into this one, what about your other self? Chuaning persisted. Would he allow it? If it comes down to a fight like the one between two Zongshis and the tail, what will you do? You know, considering what we've learned of Shime, it might end up that the Taisha and Journey of this universe and the Shime of Moran's universe destroys each other. As long as they don't take everyone else with them, I would actually be kind of here for that. Moran grinned. Who cares about some other version of myself? If he tries to stop me, I'll kill him. Great. Really inspiring confidence here, Moran. Chuaning's mouth snapped shut as goosebumps rose over his skin. Moran had truly lost his mind. So if Chuaning continued woodenly, if history were to repeat itself, and something went wrong when you tried to take Shiming Jin from your other self, then the otherworld Shiming might get crushed by the rift in space-time. A loud crash cut him off. Moran had shot to his feet, flipping the table of fruit in front of him. Grapes, tangerines, and dried lychees tumbled everywhere, rolling around like the heads he'd so wantonly hacked off. Thank you for that image. That was totally unnecessary. But also, I cannot look at the word tangerine in the context of a meat bun novel normally ever again. Thank you for ruining that meat bun, I appreciate it. Hashin Jin stalked over with great strides, his dragon-embroidered shoes crushing grapes and lychees beneath their soles, juice splattering like blood and brains. Amidst the sweetly scented carnage, he yanked Chuaning by the lapels. His eyes were savage. I know you always look down on him. You want him to die, Moran growled. How could you be so cruel? No matter what, he was your disciple too. He chose you as his teacher. He trusted you. Yet you cursed him this way, Chuaning. I'm not cursing him. Everything I'm saying is the truth. Who wants to listen to your truth? Moran roared. If this venerable one wants someone, it doesn't matter if I have to tear apart space-time, if I have to turn the universe upside down. I'm going to save him. I'm going to bring him back. If the world tries to stop me, I'll destroy the world. If I try to stop me, I'll kill myself. If you try to stop me, I'll... He stopped, chest heaving. His frantic eyes seemed to go distant. What would he do? Trample him into the dirt? But he'd already snapped Chuaning's spine beneath his feet. Humiliate him? But he'd already forced Chuaning to bow to heaven and earth alongside him. Then, kill him? If you had even an inch of self-reflection in you left, Moran, made me wonder why you could so easily kill everyone else, but clearly not bear the thought of actually killing Chuaning. I just ate a tangerine as well, which is, it's not great to now be thinking about that. An ache tore through his heart. He couldn't say it. He didn't know how to finish that sentence. Moran stormed out, leaving Chuaning standing in the desolate hall by himself. Darkness pressed in on him on all sides. All of this was part of someone's plot. Both Ta Jin and the Baidu immortal had already been ensnared. What was he supposed to do? Should the first forbidden technique be performed again? It wouldn't be a problem if the rift was small, just as small as a wound could scab over, space-time should also be able to heal itself. But if the rip was large, bringing about many changes as the two worlds collided, the outcome might be the chaos alluded to in the ancient scrolls. Nothing would be left intact. You know, I already had enough to worry about. I did not need destruction of both worlds mutually to be added to the list. She just wants us to stress about everything all the time. There is an order to the mortal world. Should the order collapse, the heavens will render their judgment. All shall return to primordial chaos. Chuaning didn't remember where exactly he'd read this, but the words had left an indelible impression on him. Indelible, sorry. They referred precisely to the consequences of opening the space-time gate. The heavens would visit retribution upon the mortal realm. The two entangled universes would both be reduced to nothingness. Great. If the first forbidden technique spiraled out of control, the cost would be the annihilation of two worlds. Chuaning couldn't let such a thing happen. He could not let Moran continue. That night, Moran was occupied citing the scrolls of Kunlun Tashia Palace that had been thrown into disarray and didn't torment Chuaning further. Chuaning took a lantern and headed to the library. Chuaning was practically powerless, and as such, Moran hadn't barred him from any areas of Shizun Peak unless he was particularly angry. This was a tiny show of mercy on Moran's part. Chuaning could freely access the library, the backwoods, and even the holy weapon arsenal. Moran kept him as he would a cat. It was enough to file down the animal's fangs and clip its claws. Now she's even like ruining the cute image of Chuaning as a cat. Now it's like, oh, you know, a trapped animal instead of like a beloved, you know, husky and cat dynamic. There was no fun in breaking its legs, shackling its wild nature, and preventing it from roaming free. Within the library, Chuaning sat and organized his various clues. After putting everything he had learned into order, he ascertained two things. Firstly, the mastermind behind the scenes had an excellent command of medicine, but their spiritual power was weak. If this person had been gifted with copious amounts of spiritual energy, they wouldn't need to exploit a pawn like Moran to achieve their ends. Secondly, this mastermind must have plotted Shime's death with the goal of rousing hatred in Moran's heart. When Chuaning had painstakingly deciphered the demon tribe's ancient text, he'd learned of the strategy. The flower of eightfold sorrow will erase all the kindness from the heart of its host. However, it may preserve their fond memories of one person in particular. To the end, the spellcaster will often ensure that the host's memories of them remain intact. The host will develop affection for the spellcaster and come to rely on them, willingly facing death and mortal danger for their sake. But doesn't that not answer Chuaning's question as to who the spellcaster is. It has to be Shime Jing because that's who he's developed the affection for. Chuaning had personally witnessed Shime's death. He trusted there was no deception there. Shime therefore couldn't be the spellcaster. And yet Moran still retained his good memories of Shime. It seemed the mastermind had used this bit of lingering warmth to draw Moran towards the three forbidden techniques. But the entire point of getting the forbidden techniques to work is to bring Shime back, which would then nullify Shime's death in this universe, as well as linking up this universe with a different universe so that Shime can then also achieve that goal consequentially. That is not a word, I don't think. But from the Genlong chess formation capable of controlling all under heaven, to the death-defying rebirth technique, to the space-time gate, which could warp the very fabric of the universe, Moran had indeed tried them one after the other, regardless of whether he had ultimately succeeded in their execution. Who would have such a pressing need to master all three forbidden techniques? Who would want to rip open space and time, risking the existence of two separate universes in order to satisfy their personal ambitions? To this he had no ready answer, but as he considered his next steps, finding the mastermind seemed the least important. What Chuaning needed to do was stop Moran before he could learn the space-time gate. After careful thought, he saw that there was one path before him. He must kill the Emperor Tashin Jun. Then he needed to return to the past, to a time before the flower of eightfold sorrow took root in Moran's heart, and find a way to nip the bough blossom in the bud. According to the text, the flower couldn't be planted in the same person's heart twice. Thus, even if the mastermind opened the space-time gate after Tashin Jun's death, they would never again be able to control Moe at the height of his power. I'm struggling to comprehend that, but we're just going to keep going. He had to kill Emperor Tashin Jun. Moths fluttered about in the dark library, drawn to Chuaning's lantern. One flew in, then the other, by killing himself. That wasn't the text, that's just the symbolism that I'm reading into that. Each instantly engulfed by the flame, leaving nothing but the faint sense of ashes. Chuaning watched that lonely light, those oblivious moths. The fire was very bright, but his heart was freezing cold. He had to kill Emperor Tashin Jun, to kill Moran. He had to kill the man who'd been manipulated and exploited, who'd suffered unknowingly so very much. In the past, as a Shizun, he hadn't properly protected him. Now he needed to scheme against him. He needed to execute him. Chuaning's eyes squeezed shut as he let his head fall back against a bookshelf. The lantern light flickered and swayed. He too was a moth, throwing himself towards a brilliant flame. He had to kill Moe. Okay, we're just gonna take a 2-second breather, because that's a lot. I just feel like there has to be more of the reason why Shime wants the space-time gate open than just to get Chuaning, because he could have gotten Chuaning in his previous life before he died, if that is what he had wanted, and there's no way that he could have schemed to do what he did to Moran ahead of his own death, because he didn't know he was going to die, unless he somehow was already able to enter the space-time gate in a third world and then orchestrated everything from the shadows in what we consider the original timeline, so that he could then get to Chuaning in the third timeline. But that feels very convoluted, so I feel like there has to be a different reason besides his own death that he needs the space-time gate to fix. And also, like, how we saw Rebirth and it was Chuaning getting to go back into his body as a spirit, but it was the body in the same timeline that he had died in. So, is there a fourth forbidden technique that no one knows about, and that is how Moran and Shime were able to regain memories or like go back to the past in an alternate timeline? Because that didn't seem like Rebirth, I don't think. I think that was actually already the third space-time thing in action, maybe? I am gonna break my brain. Let's just stop asking questions. We will get the answers eventually, I'm sure. Okay. It had begun to rain, a mist so soft it could sink into one's bones. Chuaning woke from a shallow sleep beside a man who kept him as his concubine. Moran's desire and stamina had always been astonishing. Chuaning didn't know if he coupled with Song Chitong the same way he did with him, if he unleashed the same primal lust onto her, or if that insatiable appetite was reserved for him alone. It wasn't important. I mean, I know you said it's not important, but we do know the answer. At that moment, Moran was lying right next to him, sound asleep, no different from countless previous nights. Of late, Moran had become more and more insatiable. After sex, he often refused to pull out, and the next morning he demanded a second round before he went to court. Kill him. Chuaning was no match for Moran's raw strength. He doubted he had any chance of succeeding, even while Moran lay defenseless next to him. Not yet. Wait a little longer, he told himself. He had set himself 2 tasks. He had to commit murder, and then he had to open the space-time gate before his opponent got the chance and stop Moran from being devoured by the flower of eightfold sorrows in the past. As he had no way of completing the first, he poured his efforts into the second. He would realize the first forbidden technique, the space-time gates of life and death. For some reason unknown even to himself, he possessed a vague intuition regarding this technique. He'd been piecing together the scroll fragments Moran had found. After untold struggles and failed attempts, he finally recovered the form of the original spell. Yet, without his spiritual core, it was exceedingly difficult for Chuaning to use any magic. The endeavor would have been impossible if not for his innate connection to his holy weapon, Juga, which allowed him to summon the Gurchin even without a core. Even so, Chuaning's progress was painfully slow, and he encountered innumerable setbacks. Drawing on Juga's power, he was at last able to rip open a tiny crack in space-time, one that would allow him to return to the past. I feel like I'm gonna need more pillows. Let's just pull the dragon closer. There we go. Okay, He heard a haunting whistle from within the breach as he approached. It was just as the legend said. This whistle marked both the opening and the closing of the gates. An eerie, distant voice asked, "Where did he wish to travel?" At first, his heart had pounded like a drum, but now that he had reached the threshold at last, he was suddenly surprisingly calm. "Where do you wish to travel?" the voice repeated. Chuaning glanced back at Wushan Palace, which was hosting a spectacle of song and dance. He had made certain to send Moran into a towering rage that day, and Moran had summoned Song Chitong to his side instead. He figured Moran wouldn't seek him out again soon. He took a deep breath, Phoenix eyes glinting. "I wish to return to the year when the flower of eightfold sorrow had just been planted in Moran. Back when the flower was still in the first stage, when everything could still be turned back." He hesitated. "Do you understand?" No answer came from the rift, but just as Chuaning felt his hope begin to wane, there was a flash of light, and the breach slowly opened. He stepped in, and the world span giddily. When it had righted itself again, he opened his eyes. Peach blossom petals floated before him. He'd truly gone back in time. Shizun Peak was bathed in the limpid moonlight of late spring. Chuaning stood in silence, struggling to bring his emotions under control. At last, he swept aside the flowers and walked out of the rift. He found himself in the sect's backwoods. He could smell Madame Wang's various magical flowers and herbs, and see countless pinpricks of light twinkling in the distance, where the lamps were thousands of disciples' rooms merged into a silver river like the Milky Way. That's a beautiful description, damn. To find himself back here again felt like a dream. Chuaning's face betrayed nothing, but a million emotions surged within his chest as he stood frozen. Slowly, he took one step forward, then another. He saw little disciples giggling as they ran past. He saw the Xuanji elder comparing notes with the Lucan elder upon the dancing sword platform. When he turned a corner, he even spotted Madame Wang's fast cat, Veggie Bun. No, and I'm pretty sure that's Meat Bun's actual cat's name. Which I just love so much. Like, if that is indeed the case and she featured her own cat in a novel, I would just adore that. Um, I was distracted by Vegiebun. The kitty was perched on a low wall, craning his fuzzy head to sniff a flourishing beanol rose. No, it wasn't like a dream. Even in his very best dreams, all these years, he'd never been able to return to Sishin Peak like this. I cannot be freaking crying about him just being back in the past. This is not going to go well. Drinking in every detail, he proceeded onwards. He'd never had the habit of leaving the Red Lotus Pavilion at night, and so wasn't worried about running into his other self from the timeline. Suddenly, he caught sight of two young men walking towards him. One was as lovely as a blossoming lotus, while the other was as bright as a bird with splendid plumage. Chuaning stepped, already slow. Chuaning's steps, already slow, came to a stop. These youths were none other than Shumeng and Shime. Okay, where did I put? There we go. Okay, 2 seconds. I just need to sit in this because, like, I'm so scared because we kind of like see how this turned out, but also not really. Like, I'm struggling to understand if this is gonna be the timeline in which Moran found himself in, but then at the same time, we know that there was kind of like a small possibility that he was still implanted with the flower thing at that, and maybe Chuaning's death just broke the hold that it had over him. That's what I had assumed before we found out that Chuaning actually does manage to go back into the past. So I don't know if this is maybe a third timeline. There's just so many unanswered questions with this entire novel as a whole. And I'm just nervous because it feels like the way that the Shime spoke when he found Moran in the cave. Was it a cave? But was as if he already knew everything that there was to know. And I'm terrified by that idea. Okay. Chapter 252, Soul Splitting. Did we just get the answer of why Chuaning's soul was weak when Moran was trying to find it in the underworld in a chapter title? We better not have. I will be so mad at Meatbun if that's the case. The two youths were engrossed in a... Could you guys hear that? That felt very loud to me. Okay, sorry. The two youths were engrossed in conversation, smiling easily as they chatted. At one point, Shimeng reached up to tuck a little white and yellow flower in Shime's hair. Shime, simultaneously exasperated and amused, reached up to pluck it out again, sending Shimeng into a fit of laughter. Ah, Shizun? It was too late to avoid them. When Shimeng turned, he'd already seen Chuaning out of the corner of his eye. After a moment of shock, he hurried forward and exclaimed, I didn't expect to see Shizun out so late. Great. Shimei followed with a gentle smile. Good evening, Shizun. Chuaning found himself unable to speak. He'd intended to answer as if it was the most natural thing in the world, but before he could open his mouth, the rims of his eyes reddened. Luckily, the night was dark enough to hide it. Shimeng's eyes shone with a kitten-like curiosity. Where are you going, Shizun? Just... Chuaning's voice came out as a hideous rasp. He cleared his throat, but it was a moment before he could continue. Just taking a walk. After another beat, he couldn't help asking, what about you two? No, don't give me a beautiful illustration. I'll show it to you guys in a minute. Us? We just got back from Wuchang Town. We brought back loads of delicious snacks. Shimeng was in high spirits. There was a temple festival today. It was tons of fun. Had they been talking to the Chuaning from this timeline, the conversation would have ended there. He wouldn't have cared to know more about the boys' amusements, what delicious food they'd eaten, why they were so happy. At that time, he'd been cool and distant with everyone. He'd never liked to pry into anyone's personal business, but the Chuaning who had travelled back in time found every word, every smile, every twinkle in the eye of Shimeng and Shime to be unspeakably precious. He wanted one more glance of them, wanted to listen to them talk a little longer. After all, he had no longer had any such opportunities in his world. So he asked, what did you get? Does Shizun want to see? Plainly delighted, Shimeng drew a handful of items from his Qiankun pouch, presenting them like precious baubles. Hawthorn rolls, pine nut pastries, sweet as Princess candies. He rattled off a list, then grabbed a fistful of osmosis candies and thrust them into Chuaning's empty hands. I got too many. These are for you, Shizun. Shime also rummaged through his pouch, but it seemed he hadn't brought much. Unable to find anything worth giving to Chuaning, his ears turned faintly pink. I don't need any more, said Chuaning. He took a few candies and handed the rest back to Shumeng. His eyes glimmered softly beneath the moonlight. This is plenty. He knew the space-time gate would close at any moment. He was already overdrawing Juga's power. It would be tremendously difficult to open a second rift. Besides, he only had the single stolen night. Tashin Jin might become suspicious if he were gone for too long. Quashing the tumult in his heart, he asked, "Where's Moran? Did he go out with you?" Shumeng and Shime exchanged a glance. "We haven't seen him since lunch. He hasn't spent much time with us recently," Shime added. "He's probably busy with his own things." Chuaning went to the disciples' quarters and then the temple festival, but Moran was nowhere to be found. As the hours passed, Chuaning grew more and more anxious. Brow furrowed, he pondered all sorts of possibilities until he suddenly remembered. Surely Moran wouldn't have gone too. Chuaning didn't complete the thought. Even the memory made him rather uncomfortable. His face darkened, fingers curling into fists. There was one place in particular that Moran frequented often when he'd first started going astray. Maybe Chuaning might be the reason why Moran in this timeline came back. No, let's just keep going. Chuaning, Sorry, okay, we were at the end of the paragraph. An hour later, Chuaning stood outside a building of red and purple lacquered wood. Above the door hung a scarlet plaque that read, May you feast on the peaches of immortality." This was a well-known entertainment house in the nearby Black Bamboo town, the Immortal Peach Pavilion. It was now deep in the night, yet here things were just beginning to get lively. Guests streamed through the doors, most of them either greasy-looking older men or dolled-up youngsters. And then there was Chuaning, sticking out like a sore thumb with his austere expression and rigid posture. "Welcome, welcome. Please come on in." An attendant called out at the door. "Take a look around. Today we have a famous Dan singer. Note, a female role in many genres of Chinese opera. From Xiangtan. She sings like Xunfeng Ruo and dances like Duan Yihan. Come to see the show, just 8 copper coins, 10 more for a front row seat." A sophisticated-looking gongzi waved a kilographed, I don't think that's how you pronounce that, fan, jeering as he walked by. "How shameless! Who are you calling a famous Dan? You dare compare her to the bygone goddess Duan Yihan and Shun Fengruo? That's right. 80 coins, and they have the cheek to mention her in the same breath as Shun Fengruo. Even 800 gold couldn't buy you one of Shun Fengruo's performances. This old circus is scamming people again." A passing night watchman chimed in with a guffaw, scratching his armpit. "Oh, great." Now curious, Chuaning lifted the curtain and walked in. Silky lanterns were strung up across the bustling hall, which was filled with people watching shows and drinking wine, losing themselves in a billowing sea of vogue and paint. The singers' voices had the luster of gold, and the rent boys' muscles flexed alluringly beneath the jade-like skin. On stage, a woman dressed as an imperial consort was drunkenly sprawled within a lush tableau. The opera singer's every gesture was heavy with sorrow, moving many in her audience to tears. Amazing! One more song, one more song. Chuaning knit his brows at the cloying scent of powder and perfume. His phoenix eyes scanned the crowd, but there was no sign of Moran. Had he come to the wrong place? The brothel madam, busy with the crush of guests, chose that moment to notice Chuaning amidst the crowd. She swooped over like a glittering butterfly, the million lips parting in a coy smile. Gongzi, please step up to watch the show, or head inside if you're seeking other pleasures. That's where you'll find Chuaning, aka, just so you know. Oh goodness. Sorry. I don't know why my throat is so dry today. And I just spilled. Oops. My bad. Okay. Chuaning shot her a cool glance. I'm looking for someone. Looking for... The madam paused, her smile icing over. You're on your own? Chuaning sighed and reached down for a pendant hanging from his belt. It was a gift from Tashinjin made of the finest jades. Smooth and warm to the touch, he handed it to the madam and repeated, I'm looking for someone. The madam peered down at the pendant, her eyes reflecting the luminous jade. She coughed softly and tucked the little trinket away. Flashing an even more radiant smile, she asked sweetly, Now who is the Gongzi looking for? A young man about 15 or 16, said Chuaning, surname Mo. They climbed the stairs to the third floor, which was decorated with elegant carvings, and stopped in front of a sign that said, Feirong Boudoir. Ah, there we go. Ah, sorry. Chuaning's feet sank into the luxurious carpet. Small wonder so many were willing to drown themselves in drunken pleasure here. They could exchange their coin for a fantasy as clustered with beauties as a field filled with poppies. Oh, okay. How many heroes had rotted away in such a place? With its tender glow to chase away the endless dark of night, precious few would be willing to face life's devastating realities. This is the room. The madam flipped open a wooden placard on the door, carved with the name Rongju. Her cardamom-dyed nails a pinkish blur. That is such a choice. This, I don't know, can we just quickly revisit this? The idea of small wonder so many were willing to drown themselves in drunken pleasure here. They could exchange their coin for a fantasy as clustered with beauties as field filled with poppies. How many heroes had rotted away in such a place? With its tender glow to chase away an endless dark of night, precious few would be willing to face life's devastating realities. The fact that this is the place that Meatbun chose for Moran to wake up from his stupor, from his previous life of trying to chase a fantasy. Like that feels like a very, very conscious choice on Meatbun's part, and it's kind of brilliant. This is the room. The madam flipped over the wooden placard on the door, carved with the name Rongju. Her cardamom-dyed nails a pinkish blur. She looked up, giving Chuaning a thoughtful once-over. Gongzi, please wait a moment. I'll fetch Juar out so you can go in and speak with your friend. Great. Chuaning blinked, then closed his eyes. Even a brothel madam could tell how he cared for Moran. Thank you for your trouble. She entered the room. Chuaning heard some indistinct snatches of conversation. Some moments later, she stepped out again, a young male prostitute behind her. Chuaning glanced at him. Rongju's face was still faintly flushed from wine. As he turned aside, Chuaning found he looked very familiar. though he couldn't quite place the resemblance. Oh, that's awkward. That is awkward. Yeah, no, I have to say, I'm terrified of and excited to at one point in my life do a video similar to the MXTX one that I did for Meat Bun, though I feel like having to do the research for it is gonna cause me a lot of pain. But that is at least next year's worry, if not later than that. um, the youth bowed deeply to Chuaning, then left with Madam. Chuaning pushed the door open. Inside was a garish vision of red and purple. The sight made Chuaning's scalp tingle. No incense had been lit, but the room smelled unmistakably of wine. Moran was sprawled on the bed on his side, cheek propped in one hand. His long fingers toyed with the red tassel of a clay wine jar. The bed was a sea of dishevelled crimson. Chuaning preferred not to think how it had gotten into this state. He swept like a frosty gust of wind into the central scene, a world apart from him. I mean, is it though? Shizun's here? When Chuaning didn't answer, Moran asked, "Want to sit down and have a cup of wine? It's pear blossom white, good wine. Bet you never tried it before. You're drunk," said Chuaning. Moran giggled as he watched the man in white approach the bed. He really was drunk. His hand shot out, and he boldly grabbed Chuaning's waist sash. "It's nice to be drunk. Nothing can faze me like this. Come on, the night is young. Let's have some fun." This doesn't feel like the Moran pre Ta Xinjun. This feels like the Moran after Ta Xinjun. Without a word, Chuaning hauled Moran up from the bed, yanking him out of the scarlet sea of desires. The vines on his hands stood out from the strain. Even so, his bearing was solemn, as befitting of a respectable Zhongshu. All that betrayed his anxiety was the minute trembling of his fingertips. He closed his eyes. "Moran," he whispered. The drunken youth grunted in acknowledgement and let slip another mindless giggle. "I'm already too late," Chuaning rasped. He pressed his forehead to Moran's. With a twitch of his fingers, a terrible pain blossomed in Chuaning's chest, and a holy weapon materialized, a black guqin, with an upswept tail. High-tongue blossoms unfurled along the body made of sacred wood, and its 7 strings glowed softly in the dimness of the room. Jaw clenched, Chuaning channeled the holy weapon's bountiful spiritual energy into his own body. This kind of power wouldn't stand a chance against Ta Xinjun, but it was enough for him to cast many spells. Holding Moran's forehead tightly against his own, he closed his eyes. After just a moment, he felt it, the aura of the flower of fateful sorrow within Moran. He could almost see it, a black blossom with many petals, its roots twining along Moran's arteries to drink from his heart. The visual is terrible. Here was the source of his endless hatred, the root of all the evil he'd done. Chuaning inhaled deeply. Following the instructions in the ancient text, he slowly mouthed an incantation. Then, with all the strength he could muster, he cried, "Fracture soul." His eyes flew open. A cold light flooded his vision. The flower of eightfold sorrows could only be suppressed using part of a spellcaster's soul. Just as the book described, he had cleaved his earth soul in 2. He transferred one half into Moran, where their foreheads met. The gale rose within the room, and Juga emitted a cry like a phoenix shriek as spiritual energy blazed to life. You know, the problem with these kinds of moments, or like these kinds of characters, situations, plots is that, like, Mipan has done so much harm to Chuaning, who so very much does not deserve it, that nothing she does could ever make up for the pain that she put Chuaning through. And I hate her for it just a little bit. Oh goodness. Moran, Moran. Back then, it was Ushifu who didn't protect you properly. Now I'm here to save you. I'll set you free. This was all thought. The fragmented soul transformed into a wisp of white smoke that issued from Chuaning's body. Moran had lost consciousness, and Chuaning was in agony. But he didn't let Moran go for a moment, keeping their brows pressed together. I'll save you. When the last ray of light faded, both of them reeled backward. Chuaning released his grip, and Moran crumpled onto the bed. Zhuge disappeared, melding back into Chuaning's body. After tearing away half of his earth soul, he could no longer control the heavy weapon. He settled at the edge of the bed, letting his eyes drift shut. His face was deathly pale, his lips drained of their color, but relief flooded his chest. At last, he'd taken the first step towards rewriting destiny. Using the power of his soul, he had arrested the flower's development. Moran's heart would remain unchanged. He'd swum upstream through the river of time, and finally, he had been able to protect him. Chuaning couldn't tarry here. His first errand, to stop Moran from being devoured by the flower, was complete. Now he needed to turn his attention to the second. He didn't know how patient the villain behind the scenes would prove to be. They couldn't yet tear open a rift in space-time, but caution was always prudent. He needed to impart his memories to this world's version of himself, should the worst come to pass. His self here should be equipped to mount resistance. Thus, the second thing he needed to do was find himself. The alarm sigils on the Red Lotus Pavilion were naturally useless against him. He got inside without a hitch. Standing before the open window, he looked at the white-robed man slumped over the desk inside, fallen asleep in the middle of painting the half-finished Holy Night Guardian before him. If only dealing with light ghosts and devils was still the worst of his worries, how nice that would be. Chuaning transferred the remaining half of his earth soul to his sleeping other half. The soul was his to begin with, and the slumbering man's body readily accepted it. Chuaning watched the silvery radiance curl through the air, wreathing his other self in a gentle glow until it gradually faded. A breeze rose, blowing some of the blueprints from the desk onto the floor. If another crisis arises, Moran won't make you his enemy again, he said softly, leaning against the windowsill. My spiritual core is broken, and I have now split one of my souls in two. This is all I can do. I can no longer change my own world, but you can still change yours. The man in the room slumbered on. My earth soul is the weakest among my three ethereal souls. I gave half of it to you and the other half to Moran. If your lifetimes remain peaceful, these souls wouldn't affect you. But in case the flower of eightfold sorrows takes root deep despite my efforts, or if the mortal realm is plunged into chaos, I'll leave a spell to fuse the two halves back together. Ah, and that is what returned the memories to Chuaning. Because he would never have imagined that Moran and Chuaning would happily sleep together consensually in this timeline. Though the fact that Like, let's not go back into that. I've already said what I feel about that scene. If everything went as planned, the power of the Eightfold Sorrows would be fully uprooted from Moran's heart when the two soul fragments reunited. His other self would also receive the memories from his own timeline. Don't resent me for passing this responsibility on to you. If it were possible, I'd rather you didn't have to know what I do. But he sighed quietly and said no more. At last he set about his third and final errand here. He went to Huaizhui and entrusted him with the censer he'd been working on all this time, on which he'd cast a soul-fusing spell. The spell would take the memory that had left the deepest impression on him and use it to stitch the two halves of his soul back together. And it just had to be one of those. I mean, it makes sense, but it sucks. What memory that would be, Chuaning didn't know. There were too many possibilities, he thought. Perhaps it would be the great battle at the Heavenly Rift, or the experience of being turned into a blood hourglass when Moran took him prisoner, or that agonizing moment when Moran had first defiled him. Out of so many options, he couldn't guess. Sometimes people didn't know their own hearts. I mean, if that isn't Chuaning in a nutshell, I don't know what is. Well, actually, no, that is unfair to Chuaning. Compared to Moran, who seriously did not know his own heart, that's very unfair to Chuaning. He asked Huaizhui to seal the censer in the cave on Dragon Blood Mountain. He warned Huaizhui that, in the event of a great upheaval, he was to bring both Chuaning and Moran from this world to the cave, and then Chuaning's time was up. The fabric of space-time had the power to heal itself. Even deliberate terrors like the one Chuaning had created would eventually knit back together. He wanted badly to remain, to stay in this pristine, peaceful world where all was still well. But he didn't belong here. He wouldn't defy the limitations of the first forbidden technique just to selfishly seek out a little warmth. Chuaning deserves to be protected, and because he's one of Meatbun's characters, we know that we cannot protect him. That sucks. So he left. He departed from this world that was like a lovely dream. He didn't look back. Chuaning stepped out of the rift into backwards in his own time. Just as he finished concealing the residual traces of spiritual energy, he spied a servant in red robes approaching. 出宗师, the newcomer respectfully said. It was the elderly eunuch Liu Gong, one of Moran's personal attendants. 宗师, where have you been? His Majesty's been looking for you. Great. Where is he? Asked Chuaning. In the Red Lotus Pavilion. Chuaning found Moran sitting beneath the wisteria vines with his eyes closed. As he heard Chuaning open the door, he slowly looked up and beckoned him over. Come here. Chuaning pressed his lips together, face impassive as ever. Was the music not to your liking? You dismissed the performers so early. It's got nothing to do with liking, said Moran. All the songs sound the same after a while, so tedious. He spread his sleeves wide and pulled Chuaning into his arms. He didn't bother asking where Chuaning had been. After all, Chuaning had always possessed an intractable personality. It would be strange if he idled about in the Red Lotus Pavilion all day long. Moran made Chuaning sit in his lap, then kissed him on the cheek before burrowing his face in his neck. This venerable one had a dream just now. Crap. I'm scared. I dreamed you were holding my hand, teaching me how to write. Chuaning's heart skipped a beat, but Tashin Jin, lost in his own memories, didn't notice. He continued, speaking smoothly, yet with faint notes of sorrow even he failed to discern. There was a character I couldn't get right, even after 5 tries. You were so mad, but you didn't give up on me, said Moran. You took my hand in your own, so some petals floated down into the room through the window. I saw he was so engrossed in encountering his dream he'd forgotten to call himself this venerable one. Moran paused, suddenly wistful and young again. I saw on the paper, I hope you may greet those words with a smile, for writing is akin to reuniting. There we go! You know that, Brittany from Gaywatch has this thing of, drink every single time, it's... What was it? He didn't know if he would, if he should laugh or cry. I think the one is from Heaven Official's Blessing. It's a common Chinese phrase, but it's the one that kind of we connected to his Heaven Official's Blessing. And this feels like that sentiment over and over again, where if I start drinking every single time they mention writing is akin to reuniting, I might get drunk on coffee. So anyway, I see it's 6:06 here for me, so I think let's just see where we're at. Okay, we're close to the end of a chapter, so I think I'll go until the end of the chapter and then we take the 10 minutes and come back and read for as long as the rest of the hour allows. His face splits into a grin, equal parts joyful and menacing. I can only ever see these things in my dreams. He raised his head, meeting Chuaning's troubled gaze. When he next spoke, his voice contained Tashin Jin's usual coldness once more. Do you know why this venerable one wants to see you? Moran reached up, touching Chuaning's cool cheek. You look so beautiful in that dream, he said placidly. So beautiful, this venerable one couldn't forget it. This venerable one wants to come take a good look at the real you. Chuaning lowered his lashes. I'm afraid of not hating you. I need to hate you, said Moran. A moment of clarity? Otherwise his throat went dry. Otherwise I'd never be able to forgive myself. Otherwise I wouldn't know how to carry on. Otherwise I wouldn't know how to keep dragging out the sorry existence. I have to hate you. I haven't changed my mind, and I've never been wrong to hate you. Chuaning. At length he sighed and closed his eyes. At the end, you and I are the only ones left. Was this the moment where Chuaning realizes that if he is gone, Moran might want to die as well? Chuaning felt like a knife was pushing through his heart. He was about to speak when he felt the ground give out beneath him. He was tumbling through empty air. He startled awake. His eyes were open, but everything was dark. He could hear his racing heartbeat and feel cold sweat soaking his back. Emperor Tashin Jin's alluring face seemed to hang before him. He shook all over, gasping for breath. The memories of his other lifetime washed over him, and he trembled with uncontrollable dread as those images of a past surged in wave after frantic wave. Chuaning swallowed thickly. Where was he? Where was he? Why couldn't he see anything? Why was there any darkness? His thoughts were a hopeless jumble. It was a long time before he remembered what had happened at Dragon Blood Mountain. Moran. He mumbled absently, trying to gather his fragmented consciousness. Without warning, a cold hand, smooth as silk, touched his cheek. The hand took hold of his jaw to turn his face, and a thumb ghosted over his lips. A voice obviously worked by a voice-changing spell laughed softly. Finally, you're awake. I've been waiting for ages. Not gonna lie, I'm very happy that we're taking the break there, because this is the moment that I had been dreading. I would not put it past Meat Bun for Shime to rape Chuaning after Chuaning has just been raped by Moran. I don't know if I'm mentally prepared for that quite yet. Um, and also, like, the moment that that happens, I might throw the book, because what do you mean? Do you think you're better than Moran, and then you do exactly what Moran did to Chuaning? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I don't know if Katie Abbott is in the chat, but if you are, welcome as a member. Okay, we're gonna take 10 minutes to compose ourselves and attempt to get ready for whatever the hell she's signed us up for next. And, hi. And then we'll be back. So I'll see you at 20 past. Okay, we are back. I'm very nervous. I had to go to an appointment, but I'll be back to watch the later. I hope you'll enjoy it and good luck. I hope the appointment went well by the time that you are watching this later. But yeah, I'm nervous. It's funny, like, I went out and quickly said hi to my dad because he'd come home while I was already busy with the live stream, and when I was heading to come back, he's like, should I tell you to enjoy it? I'm like, no, maybe not this one. Oh goodness. Okay. Chapter 253, we were on page 111. Bastard. Great. Okay. That unsettling, distorted voice broke the stillness of the room. Had Chuaning been able to see, he would have discovered Shime sitting at his bedside, gazing at him cheerfully. Great. Just the description we want from Shime holding Chuaning hostage. Well, captive is probably more accurate. As if he was a spider, and Chuaning a creature that had helplessly stumbled into his web. How are you feeling? Did you sleep well? Chuaning didn't immediately answer. He shifted slightly and found that his spiritual energy was woefully depleted. His wrists were bound with an immortal binding rope and his eyes by a black silk ribbon. Panic would be futile at this juncture. Chuaning had always been dauntless. He had a clear idea of his goals, and he knew how to meet any challenge with a steady heart. Across 2 lifetimes, only one man had ever put him off balance. No one else could so much as ruffle his composure. I mean, I think Shime is definitely gonna try. Chuaning silently combed through his disjointed memories and impressions from before he'd lost consciousness. He'd heard fragmented conversations and movements around him while he'd been drifting in and out of awareness. He now endeavored to piece together this information. As he thought, the door to the hidden chamber rumbled open. Nanggong Liu had returned with a basket full of fresh fruit. Dear friend Guga, here are the tangerines, he said. I picked the ones with the little circles on the bottom. They're the sweetest. He paused as he caught sight of Chuaning on the bed. Huh? The favorite consort Guga's awake? I had hoped we would never have Chuaning put back in the position of consort in this lifetime, but of course not. Of course Shime had to be Moran 2.0, while claiming not to be Moran 2.0. Tashin Jun 2.0, I guess, is the better way to phrase that. Hearing such an epithet directed toward himself, Chuaning's bloodless face instantly grew stormy. Favorite consort, as in consort Chu? So then this dear friend Guga could only be... I swear Shime chose that just for this. Shime took the tangerines from Nanggong Liu and patted him on the head with a smile. Good job. I'll have to talk to Consort Chu about a few things. Go outside and play by yourself, okay? Can't I stay? I can peel the tangerines for you. No, you shouldn't stay, Shime replied. Some things aren't fit for children's ears. I kinda want to gag right now. Nanggong Liu grumbled dopily and left the way he'd come. The room was now quiet, filled only with the sounds of their breathing and the occasional sputter of the candles. Shimei selected a tangerine, peeled it with practiced movements, and removed the stringy pit. As he worked, he spoke to Chuaning, who turned on my toes to chat about the weather. Could you tell who that was? The person who just left? Met with silence, Shime prompted, I'm sure you recognize his voice. He brought the freshly peeled tangerine to Chuaning's lips. Try this. It's a tangerine from Mount Zhao. Zhu Shuanglin planted it himself, and he knew what he was doing. It should be very sweet. Chuaning turned his face away. Look at you, Shime said slowly. In a temper the moment you wake up. After sitting silent a minute, Chuaning said coldly, Where is he? Who? You know who I'm talking about. Shime arched a brow. You mean Moran? When Chuaning didn't reply, Shime laughed softly. Looks like you really do care for him. See how his whereabouts are the first thing on your mind? You haven't even asked who I am. Surely someone who humiliated you all these years isn't worth your concern. The blindfolded man pressed his lips into a thin line, his strain showing in the sets of his jaw. As Shime stared, a maddening heat flared to life in his chest, but he still feigned calm, as if nothing fazed him. A proper meal should be eaten with elegance. It wouldn't do to bare one's fangs or leave bloody drippings. Ta Shinjin's style of wolfing everything down, bones and all, was too rash. His bowl was empty before he could appreciate the flavor. Shimingjing felt nothing but disdain for that reincarnated starving mongrel. Though a burning heat was pulling in his own belly, he would still take the time to gently massage the meat, to baste the delectable dish before him in aromatic juices. Great! Thank you for those horrible words. I don't know how I'm gonna be able to stomach multiple volumes of this, because we are nowhere near the end. That's what scares me. I wonder when you are gonna throw the book. My love for books is probably gonna prevent me, but that doesn't mean I don't deeply want it to my bones. If I had a secondary copy, I would maybe throw the first, but I do not, and these cost a lot of money, so. um, he would braise the delicacy until it was meltingly tender before savoring every last bite. Let me ask you another question. You won't eat a tangerine that's held right up to your lips? Shimei chuckled. With this with this obstinate personality of yours, how did you ever manage to keep Emperor Tashin Jin happy? Take it away. I still think it's best if you eat it. You haven't drunk any water in days, your lips are starting to crack. Where's Moran? Chuaning said between gritted teeth. Shimei fixed his gaze on Chuaning, his smile slowly fading. Whether in this lifetime or the last, whether you have your memories or not, Moran's the only person you ever think about. Shh. Oh, he almost gave himself away. Before he could finish saying Shizun, Shimei realized his mistake and promptly shut his mouth, but Chuaning caught the tiny wobble in his act. Shimei narrowed his eyes. Tell me, what's so great about Moran? He demanded, watching the last bits of color fade from Chuaning's compressed lips. He's impulsive, dense, laughably naive, and morally questionable. What is there to like about him? He waited. When no answer was forthcoming, he asked derisively, his face, his spiritual power, his charm. I mean, if those were the things, you would be able to compete fairly with Moran and you might stand a chance. But you know that's not it. That's what frustrates you. His voice was a low growl by the end, those long-suppressed carnal desires rearing their head. When he saw Chuaning biting his bottom lip as he controlled his emotions, Shime felt his mouth grow dry. His questioning veered into a more obscene direction. Or is it because he's good in bed? I mean, to be fair, this tells you that, like, from Chuaning's perspective, this eliminates Moran as the person who could be holding him because, number one, Moran would not be talking about himself in the third person in that way, and also he would constantly be referring to himself as this venerable one. We would not have heard the end of it. So this should clue Chuaning into the fact that it's either a very creepy Shumeng, which I hope we never get to see that, because I would not put it past Meatban to put us through it, but I don't want to see it. Or either Shumeng or Shime, and considering all the other connections that Tashi and Jin had to Shime, Shime should be the first suspect even though he died. I don't care, like, come on Chuaning, we know you're smart. Chuaning's pallid face colored with fury. Shut up. Of course Shime didn't listen to him. He'd gone to no end of trouble to get his hands on the man. Sorry? I don't know if the internet went out with the lights, but but the lights failed for a second there. Welcome to South Africa. Anyway. He wasn't going to stop before he'd had his fun. Grinning, he asked, perhaps Consort Chu doesn't know that Moran left the posthumous title of esteemed consort on your grave in the past lifetime. Shime's character in the novel undergoes such a dramatic transformation. It's one that I don't appreciate. Like, I'm sure that if I read back over it, it's very well laid out, but I hate it. Like, I had suspected him, I think, from volume 1. Maybe I'm being too generous. I can't remember when I started fearing that Shime was somehow involved, but I kept telling myself, like, I'm being overly paranoid. Shime wouldn't do something like that. Shime is so nice. It's okay. Like, just trust Shime. Do not listen to your paranoia. And then I wonder why I get more paranoid. Okay. Shime trained his gaze on Chuaning's face, taking in every minute change in his expression. His eyes curved into generous crescents. It sounds silly to call a bed warmer esteemed, but I guess it's fitting. In both lifetimes, no one sullied your honor but him. But that also means you have no one to compare him to, Shime mused. Of course you'd think he's the best if you've never tried anyone else. A slow fingertip traced Chuaning's features, sliding from his nose to his lips, his jaw, the jut of his throat. Chuaning vibrated with anger, tendons bulging from his wrists as he strained against the immortal binding ropes. But his efforts were futile. I hate it here. I hate it here so much. And if... Let's just put it this way. If Chuaning ends up being raped by Shime, I don't want to speak it into existence, but it seems like that's what's gonna happen, because the only person who could possibly save him right now is Moran, and Moran is too worried about Shizun Peak right now to be able to come to Chuaning's rescue. If that happens, I think the next live stream might need to be a non-live stream. It might need to be a pre-recorded thing, because I don't know how I'm gonna be coping with that. Just to be honest. Don't waste your energy, Shime advised. If Consort Chu wants to be unbound, if you want to know where Moran is, I can grant your wishes. But, as my war prize, won't you at least play a little game with me first? How about go die? How about no? How about... If I could curse, I would. I mean, I can curse, but if I were the type to curse, I would. A tense pause. What do you want? Shimei laughed. I just want to take a little bit of your heart from the person you gave it to. I want you to stop thinking about him and think fondly of me instead. How about that? You're the one who planted that good flower. Why would I think fondly of you? It was impossible for Chuaning to completely hide the despair and pain in his voice. Despite the mighty effort to quell his emotions, they were still on the verge of flooding out. Indeed I am, Shimei chuckled softly. But Consort Chu, do you know who I really am? Why don't you take a guess? If there is something you want to say, get to the point. You're as ferocious as ever, Shimei sighed. All right then. Consort Chu once said that small bets beget cheer and large bets beget ruin. You might as well go for ruin if you're going to bet at all. So why don't we have a little wager between us? After a beat of silence, Shimei added, if you don't mind, let me first see how many articles of clothing you're wearing. Just be mindful of spoilers as well. Like, I've been doing very well with not being spoiled by anything at all. I have no idea what's in store for me. But yeah, so let's just keep it that way. Chuaning didn't make a sound, but his jaw spasmed unconsciously. Shimei's spirits rose yet again. He counted 5 separate articles of clothing on Chuaning, including his robes and belt sash. I'll give you 5 chances. If you guess right, I'll tell you where Moran is. Shimei paused thoughtfully. But for every time you guess wrong, I'll take off a piece of clothing. If all your clothes are gone, Consort Chu still hasn't guessed correctly, then... Rather than finish the thought, Shimei's pale pink tongue flicked out to moisten his lips. Well, I mean, Chuaning can't see you being lascivious, so can you just verbalize all your grossness properly? He returned to his seat, waiting for Chuaning to make his first guess. If Chuaning refused to speak, that too was fine. Shimei was in no rush. If there was one thing he had plenty of now, it was time. Yet as minute after minute slipped by without a peep from Chuaning, Shimei's brows inched higher. He had plenty of time, it was true, but not necessarily the patience to go with it. Come, take a guess, he urged. Chuaning replied at last. The thing that I wanted to say, but that we're not going to say because we don't curse here. Oh no. Shimei's lips curled. Don't forget, you're at my mercy right now. Don't push me. A pause. Chuaning, you have nothing with which to bargain with me. Emperor Tashinjun isn't right in the head. He might have let you have your way when he couldn't figure out how to win the argument, but I'm not like him. Well, if there was any doubt in Chuaning's mind that this was Tashinjun, that's cleared up now. Shimingjing, go wash your mouth out with dirt, you dirty man. I mean, maybe instead of washing his mouth out, he can just choke on the soap. I don't know. He coldly continued, when you're in my hands, you'll need to be a little more obedient. He waited a while longer, but Chuaning said nothing. Don't make me resort to force, Shime warned, voice hardening. Keep silent. Keeping silent won't make things any easier for you. He reached for Chuaning's sash with one long, slender hand, his fingers trailing along the fabric like a knife slicing through the tender meat of a fish. Listen now, I'm going to count to 3. If you still refuse to speak, the consequences will be yours to bear. Oh yes, let's just say that we're nothing like Moran / Tashinjin, and then also just wash our hands of any responsibility that we bear for any of our actions, like a real man. There's a reason he was called Shime and not Shaman. Sorry, that was a terrible joke, let's just move right along. I know the correct one would be sugar, but still, anyway, or shadi, technically. Anyway, let's just, my brain is stuck on it, let's just move on. Oh no, okay. Shime's eyes gleamed faintly. He wasn't sure if he wanted Chuaning to guess correctly or not. Either way, it didn't really matter. They were long past the point of no return. He wondered how he would reveal his true identity. Whatever method he chose, it had to be both sufficiently thrilling and visceral. He had traded moves with the man before him over 2 lifetimes. Now that he'd come away victorious, he deserved to savor his triumph. 1. The world seemed to shimmer with excitement in Shimea's eyes. 2. How could Chuaning feel? Angry? Sad? Scared? He waited, lips parted in expectation. 3. I see Consul Chu intends to take his esteemed chastity to the grave. No wonder Tashin Jin was so addicted to you, said Shime, only half joking. Since you refuse to guess, we'll move on to harsher methods. You, probably none. Chuaning's voice was cold as ice. I am struggling. That is true. Oh goodness. Shime's hand stalled on its way to pulling open Chuaning's sash. He let out a small laugh. You got half of it. Go on. A fox-like smirk appeared on his face. Such cunning would be disagreeable on most people. No. You can be, like, the freaking most beautiful person in the world. If you're this crap, nothing you do is pretty. Nothing. Like, I feel ill right now. Would be disagreeable on most people's face, but Shime's elegance was such that he still resembled pure lotus blossoming over the water. Insert expletives here. He was certain Chuaning wouldn't be able to tease out that innermost kernel of truth. Self-satisfaction surged in his chest. I wish he truly died. This makes my soul happy. Thank you. I don't think this is like everything is gonna be fixed after this guess, but I am glad that Chuaning is ripping out every single shred of Shime's satisfaction like freaking fingernails. I very much appreciate it. Shime's smile froze. It was several breaths before he managed to ask, "What did you say?" The man on the bed spoke without the slightest hint of warmth. In the past lifetime, during that heavenly rift in the snowstorm, I wish you had truly died. Words of jubilation had been on the tip of his tongue, but now he found himself speechless. His hand remained suspended above Chuaning. He didn't know where to put it or what to do. The satisfaction I'm feeling right now, I know it's short-lived, but I'm basking in it. Shiming Jing. Chuaning's sigh was soft, but it left Shimei suddenly numb, as if stung by a wasp. It's you, isn't it? It was phrased like a question, but Chuaning's voice was sure. Shimei let his lashes fall, hiding his eyes. Finally he chuckled. That's right. I didn't die. Sorry to disappoint you. I mean, if you'd been a decent human, he would not be disappointed by you surviving, okay? I mean, I guess, like, he has Shimeng. I'm scared to say that because what if even Shimeng doesn't turn out to be somewhat normal? But, let's hope I didn't jinx it. That's right. I didn't die, sorry to disappoint you. He wouldn't admit he'd lost, but the elation had faded from his voice. I'm the Shiming Jing who came here from the past lifetime, said Shimei, from your other life, from Taishin Jun's world. Don't get me mixed up with the kid who'd been tagging at your heels in this lifetime. He hesitated. I'll untie you like I said I would. This feels too easy. He unknotted the immortal binding rope and tugged the ribbon from Chuaning's face. Peach blossom eyes met phoenix ones, both pairs as calm and unfathomable as an ancient well. Greetings, Shizun. Chuaning had expected this. He felt deeply grim, but not surprised. So you do remember I'm your Shizun, he remarked, fixing his eyes on Shimei. Okay, maybe don't play that game, because we know that the fact that you are his Shizun does not mean you won't sleep with someone. Like, no shade to you, Chuaning, but just, like, that is not the bar with which to fight this. When Peacock Boy turns out to be the most normal, yes. Shimei smiled even more sweetly. Only now did Chuaning see how finely honed the dagger lurking beneath that sweetness was. Hmm, of course I remember, answered Shimei. You once held an umbrella over me. I've never forgotten. As utterly spent as Chuaning was, even this couldn't negate the innate stubbornness in his features. He glared at Shimei, then said, clipped and cold, "You bastard." "You flatter me," Shimei said with a laugh. "Shizun, when did you guess it was me? Was it in the past life?" Chuaning merely pinned him with an icy gaze. Why do I want to mix all the words? His eyes contained fury, to be sure, but more prominently was disappointment. No, it can't have been, Shime mused. If you'd known I was Huabinan then, you would have told Huaizhe when you opened the space-time gate. His long lashes flicked up. It was in this lifetime, maybe not long ago. He paused. You heard some of the conversation between me and Moran at Dragonblood Mountain. Faced once again with Chuaning's silence, Shime smiled. Forget it. It doesn't matter. You're in my hands now, and you'll never escape. Look, I'm not saying that I'm gonna be okay with whatever Shime does with Chuaning, but there's a sense of relief in me that his crimes, whatever he does to Chuaning, is gonna be connected to him and not to some faceless person that Chuaning thinks is maybe Ta Xinjin. And even if it wasn't, like, even if Chuaning didn't connect this with Ta Xinjin, if he just thought it was this faceless monster, that would have been equally as horrible for me. Whereas the fact that he can name the criminal, as weird as that sounds, there's a sense of comfort for me in that. I don't know why. Okay, Chuaning's gaze seemed to shatter. Of his three disciples, Shime had always been the most mysterious to him. He'd accepted him as a student because he was gentle and respectful. He could empathize with the pain and worries of others, and he treated everyone kindly. Chuaning admired all these qualities, even more so because they were qualities he himself did not possess. I don't agree that he doesn't possess them, but okay, sure. Thus he had agreed to be Shime's teacher. But more than once he'd felt that something wasn't right. For instance, Shu Zhengyong told him Shime was an orphan he'd rescued from a war-torn area, yet little inconsistencies would often crop up when Shime talked about his life before Session Peak. It was exactly what one would expect from someone who'd made up a story and then forgotten the details. And sometimes Shime's behavior would inexplicably change for an instant, like a well-trained beast who looked docile but couldn't stop his eyes from flashing at the sense of blood. I wish we had known about these feelings before, but I understand at the same time why Meatbun kept them, because then it would have made the potential of Shime being a threat too obvious. Mm. But after watching him closely all these years, Chuaning had never seen Shime act disgracefully. He'd eventually concluded he was seeing things, that the flower before him was so splendid he'd mistakenly taken its dazzling colours for warning signs. I feel you, Chuaning, that was me. At least I'm not alone. Chuaning was like a hedgehog. His whole body was covered in sharp quills, save for his soft underside. But he took in his disciples, took in all the people who showed him kindness, and tucked them under his velvety belly. He doubted whether he should trust Shime. He'd had his reservations and tested the waters, but he'd still chosen to put his faith in him in the end. The knife plunged into the hedgehog's soft stomach from beneath, blood streaming over the ground. Thanks for that. Oh, if it doesn't have spoilers, I would love to see some of that fan art. How much of the past life do you remember now? Shimei asked. Of course, he was answered yet again by silence. Shime continued his interrogation. You were getting along perfectly well, staying out of it. Why'd you put yourself through all that suffering to stop me? He had manifold grievances from the past lifetime. Now that Shime finally had a chance to get answers, he couldn't pass up the opportunity. You spared Emperor Tashin Jin's life. You even helped him transmigrate and be reborn. Thank you for answering that. Why? At this last question, Chuaning at last looked up. He's not like you. I mean, that is true unless we find out more information later on, and I'm not trying to justify Moran's or Tashin Jin's actions, but the level of warped that Shime just naturally is. Shime had to plant a leech-like spell in Moran's heart to create a similar monster to one that he himself naturally became. That's very concerning. Okay, last 4 minutes, and then I am calling it quits regardless of where we're at, because I'm very glad we're not doing 3 hours for this book. It is emotionally taxing, as is. Shime hesitated. How so? Perhaps I'm ruthless, but aren't his hands covered in blood? Chuaning stared at Shime. You know what you planted in his heart. So what? I might have planted the flower, but he's the one who killed all those people. Shime retorted. You saw it with your own eyes in the past life. He laid waste to the land. Shuzhen Yong, Wang, I don't think I've ever seen Madame Wang's full name. Wang Chuqing, Jiang Shi, Ye Wang Shi. Who slaughtered them all in cold blood? Sir, did you forget that you did this in this timeline? Do we need to remind you? We can. I don't mind going down a list of all the reasons why I currently hate you. It might take a while though. Shime lifted a languid hand, peering at his slender fingers and his neat, round nails. Those hands were clean and refined, unmarred by a single speck of dust. He slanted Chuaning a glance and laughed. Surely it wasn't me. Red-hot fury blazed up in his chest, rendering Chuaning temporarily speechless. I never wished to massacre Wufeng sect or kill Shu Zhenyong. No one would come to me to avenge them. Shime continued. What have I done? I merely gave him a good flower. I've never killed anyone as long as I've lived. Yeah, no, I remember. Shime cheerfully concluded the knife was in his hands and he drove it into their chests. It really has very little to do with me. No. You are saying I gave him the gun, but it was his actions. But it was not I gave him the gun. It was I gave him the gun, lied to him and told him that everyone had betrayed him, and then sent him off on his merry way. It really was very little to do with me. The flower of eightfold sorrow doesn't create new grudges. The curse can only amplify what was already there. All those desires were his own. It would be too unfair to blame me for his crimes. Then why did you incentivize people to recommit all the crimes he had committed in the past lifetime? Every word Shime spoke heightened Chuaning's disgust. At the word unfair, Chuaning's eyes flashed, glacially cold. What do you find unfair about it? Those were all his actions. Why would Shizun blame me? Don't you know what kind of person he really is? Of course I do, replied Shime. I'm afraid Shizun's the one who's confused. A thread of tangerine pith was stuck between two of Shime's fingers. He produced a white silk handkerchief and gingerly wiped it away, then intoned, Why did Moran raise Rusong Sak to the ground? Because his heart held hatred. Why did Moran kill Shuzhen Yong? Because his heart held fear. Why did Moran defile you? Because his heart held lust. His gaze flickered over Chuaning. If someone stabbed him once, he would never forgive them. If someone gave him an inch, he'd take a mile. If a beauty stepped towards him, he'd have to have a taste. That's the kind of person he is. It's so interesting because Shime's first lifetime twisted him in a way that we don't know if he ever was, like, if he would have gone to that extent had he just lived his first lifetime until the end without any interference. Whereas Moran's first lifetime made him accountable for his actions. Like, there's a sense of reflection in the Moran that was once Ta Xin Jin that there is not in the Shime or in the Huabinan who was once Shime. Gaze flickered over Chuaning. If someone stabbed him once, he would never forgive them. If someone gave him an inch, he'd take a mile. If a beauty stepped towards him, he'd have to have a taste. That's the kind of person he is. Shimingjing, said Chuaning through gritted teeth. He erased all the kindness from his heart and amplified his grudges and impulses by 1,000, 10,000 times. Can you really say with a straight face that he wished to do all those things? Who wouldn't wish to destroy the world if they were consumed by hatred? You? I mean, he already did, so that's a pointless question. Whose fault is it that he held grudges? That he had greed carved into his bones? That he had those impulses in the first place? I don't think that is fair. I think most people in life hold grudges. Like, they might be small and insignificant, but they're probably there. And if all the happiness in your life is removed, then all you're left with is the negative emotions. And how can you then hold on to morality? It becomes a lot harder, and I think you would be hard pressed to find someone who wouldn't stray from their original morality when all they are left with is negative emotion. Now, most people would not go on a destructional spree, I don't think. Maybe a self-destructional one, but not a worldwide destructional one where they became emperor of the world. But it's not a fair comparison that Shime is making, but we all know that. He's just making excuses for his wrongdoings. And no accountability. Like, that is, if he wants to know what makes him different from Moran, it's the fact that he, as a person who's lived to the age of 20 now, I think is where Moran and them are at. So he is effectively a 35-year-old kid. Like, he is a toddler who is unable to take any accountability for anything ever. Okay, sorry. Shimei laughed. If his heart were pure, with no ill intentions, the flower of eightfold sorrows would have had no effect. What happened was because his heart was filthy, he's simply a vulgar man. Okay, so then who do you think is virtuous enough that they would not be corrupted by it? If you can give me one example, then you win. The expression on Chuaning's face grew deeply ugly. Just as he drew breath to respond, Shime added, "People are responsible for their own desires. That's an undeniable fact." So close. So close to not being done. So close, and yet so far. Chuaning had been ready to argue with him, but at this, he suddenly felt like there was nothing more to say. He turned away. Shime shook his head. "Shizun, you're always on his side. You think there's a reason, an explanation, behind everything he does. Tell me then, whose explanations should I believe?" Chuaning asked icily. "Yours?" Shime was quiet for a turn, then chuckled. "So Shizun still likes him?" Chuaning's eyes were like a frozen lake reflecting the cold moon. "I've been trading blows with Shizun across 2 lifetimes. I still can't compare to him, even when I've won." "What is there to compare between the two?" Chuaning replied coolly. Shime narrowed his eyes. "Is that really what you think of me? Is there nothing else you wish to say?" Chuaning didn't reply right away. He seemed to ponder the question in earnest. Then he lifted his lashes. "There is," he answered evenly. Shime broke into a smile. "What's that?" "There's no need for you to compare yourself to Moran," Chuaning said expressionlessly. "You aren't even worthy of a comparison to Shuanglin." "Oh! Oh, ow!" "Chuaning, maybe not while you're weak and he has you at his mercy." He at least had a real passion and wasn't afraid to act on it. Chuaning, Shime has a real passion. He has a real passion for you, and if you don't show, she's gonna act on it and gonna rape you, and I'm not gonna be happy about it. He at least had a real passion and wasn't afraid to act on it. He wasn't like you, Huabinan. He didn't even bother calling him Shimingjing anymore. "You're just a bastard." We went a full 10 minutes over 6, and I was so set on just stopping as soon as we hit the 7 7 p.m. mark, but you wouldn't, meat bun. I read until the end of the freaking chapter. Okay. I mean, that went better than I expected, but it doesn't mean it can't go worse again. I'm just glad we didn't have any traumatizing moments so far. The bar is so low anyway. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll be back next week, same time, for the next bout of pain. So I'll see you guys then. 再见。